process. And you have, for instance, much later at the Council of Florence, still before the Reformation, the Catholics, the Orthodox, and the Coptic Christians coming together and affirming again these 73 books. So we either trust that the Holy Spirit guided that process, or we don't. So you either are left with the Catholic Bible or nothing.
Hey, welcome to Theologia Evangelica. Today we have a very special guest, perhaps the greatest theologian of our time, Anglican extraordinaire, the other Paul, has graced upon us his presence so that we may come into the light of wisdom and truth about this topic of dissent. So the other Paul, thank you for coming and welcome to the show.
Mate, thank you very much. Finally, a fellow Aussie I can have a discussion with. But wow, way too heavy with the flattery there, my friend. But thank you.
No,
actually, really quickly as well, it appears that you might have used the same stream key, so it's streaming as interview with Taylor Barrett, etc.
Oh, you're kidding? Oh, dude.
So I don't know if you can change the stream name live, but whatever, you can at least do it after the fact.
Yeah, I'll do that. But yeah, I hope that doesn't affect your end too much.
No, it shouldn't. I'll let my audience know about that.
Okay. Yeah, dude, I gotta. I'm sort of new to this whole thing, so I'm still getting a handle on the whatnots. So, but yeah, it's a work in progress. But thanks, the other Paul, for coming on. And so, can you tell us a few things about yourself? How you going anyway?
Of course, yeah. I'm a Sydney-based Australian Anglican, or a Sydney Anglican, although more so in terms of technical jurisdiction and not quite in certain theologies. Maybe we can get into that. But so that's my basic tradition, I guess, and that's coming out of Pentecostalism when I left Hillsong in 2021, and that was how I was born and raised as a Pentecostal, and essentially came to Anglicanism more or less by happenstance, just by finding, hey, this is a parish, it appears to be pretty good, so I might as well just stay there. Actually, I just realized my microphone is really bad. Tell me.
No, it seems fine to me. I can
Does this
hear
sound better?
Perfectly fine. Yep, that sounds even better.
Yep, yeah, I thought so because it was using my webcam mic for a second there. So anyway, I've changed that. But yeah, so I was Pentecostal, went Anglican only by happenstance. I just wanted to find some generally reverent Protestant quote unquote church. Your video appears better as well. That's good. So but I happened to find an Anglican church in that, and when I joined it, I thought, okay, I'm a man of principle. I'm going to see what they officially confess and see if I can conform myself to that or not. And so I started looking into the Anglican tradition, the authoritative texts like the 39 Articles of Religion, and I came to eventually see, oh boy, yes, I can come to agree with this. I didn't agree with all of it at first, but I was eventually persuaded to come into full agreement with the articles minimally. And I came to see, no, the Anglican tradition is the best representative of the Christian faith, the best interpretation of Holy Scripture. So that's how I came to that. And with my channel, which I started as a Pentecostal, that was I really began with it, properly speaking, late 2020, early 2021, maybe. And so I think even before that, actually, probably early 2020. And so doing all that, and that the whole channel then, and it still is now, is basically making any and all content on theology and history, especially church history, which I see a need for good quality content on, which other people are lacking on, and to the degree as to allow others who watch it to do their own research. So I give every source I use, I provide them to my audience so they can research for themselves. And yeah, that's basically that. I hope you're still there because, okay, great, you're still here. But yeah, that's basically me in sum.
That's really it's an interesting story, and it's one that's sort of growing as well. In you hear more and more about this sort of trend towards higher church theology and ecclesiology and worship, and it's something worth noting. Yeah, but it's obviously sort of bucks the trend, which has been happening in the past too. Not just in like decades past towards sort of megachurch, like low church sort of worship, but you know, the sort of the reform, the young restless reform sort of influence that has happened in the past. That's still a big mega thing online, isn't it? And they sort of have an ethos, sort of a fear against high church worship. I sort of imagine, and maybe a hesitancy to even consider having candles in church or things like that. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, your whole background is it sort of colors the approach that you come to on the topics that you have. But now, just to get back to the topic of your book, because and it's still coming out, isn't it? It hasn't come out yet.
No, it hasn't. I'm still writing it. Like, as I write more and more, I find, oh man, there's more distinctions I have to account for. And so as I write, I end up, like, normally speaking, all else being equal, as you write a book, more of it's complete, and so there's less to do. But for a little bit now, in these recent periods of writing the book, I've been finding the more I write, the less overall I've completed, because I find more things I have to account for, and then I have to write about that, and so on and so forth. So I'm trying to be quite thorough with it, but not to the level of it turning into like a 1,000-page tome. I'm trying not to do that.
I wouldn't mind, to be honest, if you produce something like that.
I wouldn't mind either, but that would be something definitely for the far future. This is something I want to be quite accessible.
Yeah, that's the problem is, and I have this problem too, because I preach in church sometimes, and the way I preach is I'm thinking of an audience that, like my fellow people who are educated in theology, and I find it really hard to think about, okay, I'm not preaching to that type of person. I'm preaching to the person, who hardly picks up the Bible, if that. Every now and then, and they don't know the difference between Martha and Miriam, so it can be quite difficult, especially when you get excited about topics. And I imagine you're quite passionate about this topic of dissent, and you want to sort of say as much as you want about it. But yeah, you have to think about who's going to read it, and that makes it hard.
Absolutely.
But who were some of the theological influences behind this book, or behind your position that you take?
Well, it's funny. I guess it's really just the general tenor of the Reformation, really. It's just the general sense where we have this great institution, the church, or at least certain visible manifestations of it. And it's telling us, hey, you must believe this, you must affirm that, you can't do this, you can't believe that, which is all well and within its power. But then there comes the obvious problem. What if it becomes quite clear that these visible leaders are telling us one thing, but the actual divine sources upon which their authority is predicated, namely Holy Scripture and the tradition of the apostles, what if it's clear that those two things are in contradiction? The authority of the church, or again, certain visible authorities therein, and Scripture, or the apostolic tradition. And the Reformation clearly said, well, we're clearly seeing that this is the case now, so in principle it can happen. Therefore, when it does happen, we have to obviously side with what Christ and the apostles themselves taught over what these other authorities do. And thus we have that right to dissent from those things, because we have the higher devotion to what God teaches over and against what human authorities allege God is teaching. And so, and obviously the book's, as you've probably seen with it, the book's topic is not quite about Reformation issues, but certain modern issues that tend to be sacred cows in a very analogous way, actually. When you come to think of it, there is a sort of church, if you will, of the modern age, but it's more in the form of the modern complex of various cultural institutions and political institutions, which nonetheless agree around this overall religious framework, as I call it, of the post-war consensus. And I'm basically saying in the book, we need to revive the Reformation spirit to oppose that era.
Yeah, that's helpful. But how would you say? What would you say in response to someone who says there's too much dissent happening in the church today? Like everyone's just sort of dissenting for any reason.
Well, actually, I'd kind of agree. I'd agree to a great extent. And so, the whole purpose of the book is me basically laying out principles for how can we discern what is rightful and not rightful dissent on various matters, whether it's a matter of whether it's a matter of natural law / reason, or matters of Christian faith directly, or even various specific circumstances in different areas of life. And so the first part of the book is basically all that, just establishing those principles. And then the very last chapter of that basically sums all that up in like a checklist for how to discern whether a certain claim or a proposition is something that can be disagreed about by Christians, or if it can't be. So in essence, and I only realized this very recently, in essence, it's very similar to what Dr. Ortland did with his Finding the Right Hill to Die On, a theological triage and all that. Only with mine, I'm making it both more general, but I'm also getting a lot more precise with defining, okay, now what are the criteria by which we discern these different things? And so that's basically the case. That's basically what I'm trying to do. With that book. And so to discern, well, there's too much dissent. 100% agree. And so I'm trying to mitigate that by trying to order it. Okay, here's the principles that we actually need to follow, so that, God willing, we can bring some more unity back to the modern church.
That is good, and I like how you ended that with the theme of unity, because, and I imagine that you one of the issues that you want to tackle in this book is to say that just because one is dissenting does not mean that they are a schismatic, and that they undervalue the unity of the church, but rather it's sort of you're gauging and you're making a hierarchy of what are different levels of unity, say, and some are more essential than others, but perhaps your act of dissent is itself ordered towards a unity. So that's pretty interesting. I'm pretty excited about it. Can you give us any an estimated time when you're going to be releasing it, or just?
Yeah, so but the idea initially was actually basically to have it. Well, it was a very, very, very optimistic estimate, in fairness, to put it at the start. But the idea was sometime basically in February. But again, that was always very, very optimistic. I always had, in the end, I had a lot of work to do, and both in like a out of home job, but on top of my channel as well, which I am trying to make a job. And so all that stuff has basically meant like I only have so much time to work on it. But the estimate now, at least for me personally, I haven't discussed it with my publisher friend, but for me personally, my estimate is generously late April, realistically May onwards, somewhere around there.
Okay, that's not too far away.
Yeah, it's not too far, just because like I've done probably honestly most of the most detailed meaty parts of it, which is basically the areas on principle. But as I said before, there's like every time I keep writing on it, I find that there's more things I have to account for. I have to change this and that. So it's getting just frustrating that way, but it is almost done there. And once those principle sections are done, then the rest of the book, which is basically just application, case studies and all that just flows like that. It's easy. So yeah.
Okay. And what was your experience writing the book?
I mean, pretty much, well, if I may be bland, it's just a matter of I've just been sitting down, putting aside time, reading and researching stuff, and then just writing. It's pretty yeah. Although I will say some people have there's some like online trolls. I mean, like they're kind of trolls, but who when I've announced I'm doing the book or whatever, and I'm doing it through this publisher, Sacra Press, they're like, oh, he's a guy with like naughty opinions on this and that, and it's like, okay, cry harder. And like, oh, you're pushing for these bad things, like denying the big 20th century event. You know what? I don't want to get your channel like a potential mark on it on YouTube. And it's like, well, no, I'm not. I'm basically just arguing that if there's a Christian who just honestly questions, in this case, the received narrative of the Second World War to any extent, that is in principle, there is nothing wrong with that, because it's not an article of faith. The history of the Second World War, questions of the nature of race, even, and how we and what we think, how we consider, and how we interact with the Jewish people. Those are things that actually can be dissented on. These modern opinions of, oh no, there's no such thing as race. The Second World War is exactly what you were taught in the high school, and the Jewish people are pure victims in every single circumstance, notwithstanding whether one thinks those things are right or wrong. In principle, and the whole point of my book is to basically say, in principle, a Christian can disagree with that, because those claims are not articles of faith. And I happen to disagree with a number of them, not all of them, but with a number of those things. But most importantly, my book is not really arguing for the contrary positions, and that's the mistake a lot of these trolls have made, where they take where I say it's okay for someone to question Second World War history or alleged atrocities by Germany and what have you as a historical question, and then they take that and then they twist that to make me say, oh, you're actually denying that those things happen, which it's not. That's obviously ridiculous. It's not the same thing. I'm simply arguing that it is a demonstrable fact that these things can be dissented on in principle by Christians in good standing before God and the church, because those things are not articles of faith. So if you're going to, and many of these people, they functionally damn to hell, those people who question aspects of World War II history, basically meaning that they're adding to the deposit of faith. And that's where it comes back to the whole reviving the Reformation spirit, because now they're binding on Christians things which are not clearly taught by the revealed word of God. And I'm sorry. And it's very ironic for them, because a lot of them tend to be very quote unquote conservative, reformed Christians. And so I'm kind of just doing an Uno reverse card against them, saying, you want to have these points against Rome. Well, guess what? If you're going to be consistent, you can't go saying this other stuff now. And so that's been the experience, where otherwise I'm just sitting down, I write it, whatever. But then since announcing it, obviously a lot of people have come out saying, oh, I'm excited for it. It's going to be great. But then a few people come out and say, oh, this you're just doing these bad, big, naughty opinions. It's just like, okay, cry harder. And we'll read the book and try to refute it. I wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, but doesn't matter what you say. They're just going to be saying, well, what was that? What were you saying, denier? Like, no, come on. So it makes it really hard. I'm gonna have to. I'm getting comments about this, the stream key not being changed, and I have to apologize for everyone. I don't even know how to do it right now. So you're just gonna have to put up with it. And I'll fix it up later, I suppose.
Yeah, no, it's just a stream. It's just a stream error for everyone who's watching. So yeah, he'll minimally he'll change it after the fact, or if not, maybe while I'm saying something, maybe you can look around and see if I don't know if that can even be done. If it could change, it could be, maybe, I don't know. But anyway, yeah.
So just to confirm, do you think this this was perhaps at least as much politically motivated as theologically, like for theological concerns, or
no, good question. Well, I'd say, I mean, if anything, it's hard to separate them, but I'd say, there was perhaps the political motivation, like in terms of the political issues involved, that probably was the primary motivation. Obviously, because I believe, as any Christian should, that all knowledge is integrated, and so my political positions are predicated on my theological positions. And so in a number of ways, it's obviously both. But in terms of the most proximate cause, yes, I would say it's the political issues, where people try to condemn other Christians to hell for having dissenting opinions on things which have nothing to do with the faith. And especially since that happened to me, because I basically made a post in late 2023 where I just out of nowhere I just posted saying, hey, well, basically what I said to you, hey, a Christian can have dissenting views on the Second World War history, and I named certain particular things just to kind of really push the point across, and in principle still be a good Christian in standing before God and the church, because those things are not articles of faith. Could he be wrong? Yeah, sure. And that's not what I'm arguing in this post. It's just a matter of like people can have these differing opinions in principle. And so it's something we accept with tons of different things. Various scientific questions, questions of like, I don't know, like military strategy, even various questions of history and all that jazz. Because indeed, even in mainstream academia, some critical things are allowed to be debated on the history of the Second World War. And when I posted that, a number of guys who I was friends with commented, and they were saying like, "Oh, mate, Paul's taking one for the team," because this is before the stuff like in the recent couple of years or year especially where it started to get a lot more mainstream. But also a ton of people came out of the woodwork basically saying, "Oh, you racist! Oh, you anti-Semite! Oh, you hate these people! You hate them! You're evil! You're going to hell! Blah blah blah." When I didn't even make any claims on the history at all, just that it's okay for Christians to dissent on the history. And so and so that kind of I'm very glad that happened, because that's basically the event I can point to if someone tries to gaslight you the other way. Some people have tried to gaslight me saying, "Oh, no one's saying you can't dissent." Yeah, try again, mate. And so that event eventually got me to the idea of making this book. I'm not exactly, I can't remember exactly when, but it was a little bit after. It didn't immediately come, but eventually afterwards, reflecting on it and experiencing it a bit more in the future. Now I don't get anywhere close like the same level of hate, just because the discourse has now been a lot more mainstreamed, these dissident takes and opinions. But since then, reflecting on that and going through the motions of the political struggles, I eventually came to the idea, you know what? So many Christians are so malformed on this issue that there needs to be a book that just sets it straight. That Christians, both laymen and clergy, can use to actually discern whether something they're discussing can actually be disagreed over or not.
Yeah, and obviously, I think it's pretty obvious that most of the pushback would be coming from Christians, and that would be due in large part to, I suppose, dispensationalism. So there is I mean, they probably wouldn't say that they're unopen to considering it, but I think in general, I mean, they're sort of forced to say, you know, hey, they're this special people, right? Like, can do no wrong, and we have a duty to we as Christians, we sort of have a duty to protect and defend them in a sense. So yeah, it's gonna be, you're gonna get a lot of pushback from Christians.
100%, yeah.
And if you look at general culture, I mean, most sort of secular people seem to be quite critical of this, you know, the state of, you know, that place right now. I mean, so you probably get more support from secular people, to be honest, from Christians, which is quite odd and ironic.
It does.
Just generally, yeah. Sorry.
No, sorry. Go.
Yeah, just generally on dissent. Can you sort of pinpoint for us or help us to think through some of these things? Like, I'll just give you some some examples. Often, people in church will be say they've done something which opposes the teaching of the church, or they've done something immoral, and say they've come under the discipline of that church, and very often this individual will just say, okay, I'm going to find another church. Do you sort of address that sort of issue in the book, or is that something that you might come back to in another book or something like that? Or
that would definitely be something for another book, which I may do. I mean, I may end up writing a book on just about every key issue I see. But yeah, that'd definitely be a different issue, because that is more on the question of dissent and authority and ecclesiology, specifically in those areas, whereas this one is much more addressing a political issue.
And what do you think about the church getting involved in political issues? Do you think that's a no-no, or I mean, I know what you say, but can you sort of elaborate on that?
Sure, yeah. No, the church obviously should be, especially because it's only until like recent couple of centuries or so where this idea of the complete separation of religion and politics became a thing. Whereas in
Mm.
the time of Israel and in the time of the church, and for 1,000 plus years afterwards, it was always assumed that religion and political matters, they were both essential matters of the common life of the civil polity, and therefore in many ways are addressed in tandem, and they both have the interest of the state. But also because what the church teaches, what Holy Scripture teaches, has actual effects, has actual consequences, and commands for common civil polity and civil life. And because the church herself is sent to preach to the nations, not just to this individual and then that individual, but to preach publicly to the nations and to the rulers, then obviously from all that taken together, it clearly, irrefutably follows that the church needs to have a voice in political matters and needs to somehow become the dominant voice so that it can guide the state towards the good, properly speaking.
Mm. Yeah, and in the history of Anglicanism, and especially in relation to, including in relation to, Presbyterianism, as well as the Catholic Church, the whole issue of politics is central to, and it has been helpful for Anglicanism in shaping its understanding of ecclesiology and the distinction between the church and the state. But obviously, the Anglican Church does not affirm a complete separation of those. So you're very in line with your own church's understanding. But the issue then comes, say, if you have a Christian state, what kind? I mean, how do you flesh out how one can dissent, or to what degree a person can dissent to the government in terms of civil matters?
That is a good question, because I did actually consider a little bit. I basically had like a chapter title section there, like just in the document there for doing it, for the question of dissenting from the civil polity, from the civil government, because that's obviously a very relevant question to answer. But upon reflection, I realized, well, actually, the question I'm trying to address is more something of principle, right and wrong, more directly, as opposed to like in terms of the individual Christian experience and the church, rather than the rights of the state and all that. So they are separate enough questions that I decided not to go into that in the book and just devote more space to the key things I am actually focusing on.
Well, that's good. Yeah, and I'll help you sort of finish the book earlier too,
100%.
for our
Yeah.
benefit. So that's great.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now, perhaps if you don't mind me asking you, are there any sort of more current issues, apart from the one that we were discussing earlier, um, that are pertinent to the topics of your book?
Well, really, it's really those issues, just received 20th century history, race, and the Jewish people. Those are really just the issues, like the ones where this is a massive problem. Maybe like there's obviously various subtopics and what have you, regarding them, but otherwise, nah, really, those are the issues that
Hmm.
where there is the huge problem of Christians. I mean, unbelievers, just put them to the side. Obviously, they'll have problems with like everything, but for Christians in particular, those are the issues where the church at large, except for small pockets, has a completely whack understanding of what they can oblige the layman to believe, let alone the
Hmm.
clergy. Completely whack, completely unbiblical, unpatristic, straight up just adding to the gospel in many cases. Where I have received a number of those condemnations people leveled at me for, again, not even like this is before I actually gave any clearly dissident opinion, and I don't right now. I deliberately don't give my opinion on Second World War history until I've thoroughly studied it at some point in the future. but merely so. But before I really got into it, again with that first post, not even for giving dissident opinions on these issues, but merely for saying it's okay to have dissident opinions on these issues, people were condemning me to the hellfire, basically, including a clergyman in Sydney, who I shall not name. And so seeing that, I was like, my word, it is a terrible state out there where people think you can just flippantly condemn someone to hell for opinions on matters that are not sinful and they have nothing to do with divine revelation. It's insane, absolutely insane.
Yeah, it is the whole issue of toleration. How far the church and individuals can tolerate each other's different views, dissenting views, is quite central to the whole orbit of what you're communicating. And yeah, it's very pertinent now, because the whole issue of tolerance is quite a major theme in society, isn't it? It's just so all these different competing and polarized views, and everyone claims to have the moral view, from which, if one opposes, then one is the evil incarnate often, and just to even give the other side a listening ear is, in some sense, to be a participant in that person's evil. And yeah, so this is quite a culturally relevant book that you're doing, and it's not just limited to one historical thing. It's quite I think it has far-reaching. I'm not trying to just praise you, but I think your book has far-reaching consequences, not just for things that happened in the past and currently, but how the trajectory of the way that society is thinking morally. So that's quite helpful. Perhaps you can write another book developing those sort of themes.
Well, so what would you think by that, developing themes?
Yeah, it's I mean, you could just, part of that would be the sexual ethics of today. I mean,
yeah. I mean,
obviously,
there's a fair number of people who've done good books on that. I do have other book projects, like either in my mind or one other where I've actually written a huge amount of it, but the book itself is going to be so massive, it's like barely halfway done, probably not even. So yeah.
For me personally, one of the sort of perhaps tangential to the political side of it, but I think it's still a species of that sort of mode of acting in relation to authority, which is there's sort of ambiguity as to how one relates to authority, and there is a sense in which authority is it's ill-defined. But then when it has been sort of defined by appeal to some sort of collective identity, then once you've identified yourself as part of that collective group, then you've identified yourself as the goodies, and then anyone else as the baddies, and then there's sort of a post facto justification for not listening to any other person's point of view. So yeah, I mean, and I see this also in I also see it, I believe, in the context of Christianity, in when people sort of convert to different sects or groups, that there's often like I don't need to listen to what you've said because I already know what you're saying, and you should come over here. We're the good guys, you're the bad guys. And there's less often a spirit of ecumenical dialogue, particularly with say converts who often get on the apologetic track. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you just all these sort of like online, like perhaps the majority of these sort of apologists online often, I mean, are converts, and they're sort of, okay, now I'm on the good side. It's just, yeah, I don't know where I'm kind of rambling on, but yeah, I hope something coherent comes through there. But yeah, I mean, it's a whole broader issue, and it's helpful for what you're doing to sort of clarify the issue. But yeah, thanks for helping us in that regard.
Of course.
Now, in relation to the political thing, I mean, before your book comes out, can you say more about? Did you provide any sort of arguments, like historical arguments, or were you basically providing basic fundamental principles for thinking through these things?
Principles, yeah. So I'm not giving historical. I'm very deliberately in that book not giving historical arguments this way or that on these issues, or even biblical arguments on the matters of like race or whatever and stuff like that. I'm deliberately not arguing for dissident opinions on those things, even if in some cases I do hold the dissident opinions. But rather, I'm simply saying there's the more meta level of, okay, before we discern whether before we argue over which of these two or more views are right or wrong, we need to answer the meta question of, if and when we don't come to agreement, can that agreement be tolerated in Christian communion? Or is disagreement such that if one side is true, the other side is a true heresy, or at least a heteropraxy such that you can't be in the same communion with them, or what kind of error? And so before we even get into the debate, we need to discern, okay, when there's disagreement, what kind of relationship can we still have? That's basically the question I'm having with the book. And my key argument essentially is that, I mean, I'm kind of with the race one. It's tricky because actually Scripture does have a fair bit to say about race, and depending on if you go one side or the other, that can have some big implications on your anthropology. But as it stands, in principle, holding a denialist view of race or a realist view of race, in principle, that shouldn't. And even then, it's a bit tough to say. In principle, that shouldn't have a massive effect on just like your everyday parish church life and your walk with God and all that stuff. It'll affect other things with how you behave socially, but whether that's to the extent that you have to break communion with someone or you consider someone a heretic, I'd say for the most part, no. That's what I'm essentially going to argue. Now, there can be certain extreme views, obviously, where you'll basically say, okay, no, we can't be in communion. And from either perspective, the other is the heresy. But I'm more treating like the general opposing views. And so on the whole, I'm basically going to be saying, at minimum, in principle, these dissident views, they're not sinful. And so a Christian can hold them in good conscience. And so stop trying to not just damn people to hell for them, but also trying to destroy their lives. Because that's happened multiple times now. I mean, it's happened for a very long time, but even in just the more recent 2 or 3 years, where more dissident guys have come out, whether deliberately or they've been doxxed and all that, and they've had their lives ruined. It's had massive effects there. But by God's grace, I've been able to maneuver it in such a way as to more or less make myself cancel proof. Even though I do like go right in the forefront with the spicy takes, I've maneuvered things in such a way as to build a good rapport with many good people and well grounded people, such that when I do give my spicy takes, many of them will think, I'm not sure about that, but I know Paul, so I'm gonna be lenient. And so yeah, that's more or less the lines I'm trying to go down with it.
Yeah, you were saying earlier that you've already received some sort of pushback, just because your association with the publisher, and that's quite crazy,
Yeah.
So you don't even need to read the book before you can reject it.
No, yeah, exactly. It's hilarious. So that's why I genuinely can't wait for when the book comes out. Not only obviously because there's going to be a lot of whatchamacallit. There's going to be a lot of people who want to get it and they'll buy it. B, that'll mean some, hopefully, God willing, some decent. We've settled on the royalty amounts, obviously, from the publisher, but just like in terms of the sales numbers, God willing, that translates into a decent temporary income for me, decent passive income for a little bit. Although that said, the plan is also, because I have a personal principle that, and I made sure that the publisher agreed to this, and he did. That I have a personal principle that every book I write and release, I will, after a, say, 3-month period, and that is the idea. After a 3-month period, I'll release the PDF for free. So people can buy still free copy, buy copies, physical copies, and all that, and there'll be a deliberate 3-period gap where you can only buy the physical copy, so as to encourage sales. But after that, I'll release the PDF for free, because I genuinely don't believe in intellectual property. I think it's a made up category, and so being consistent with that, I want to release all my full book projects for free digitally. So there's that. And I completely forgot where I was going with this. It was about the publisher. Yeah. And so I'm hoping people buy it, obviously. But I'm also really, really excited for when I do release it, and God willing, it makes a splash. I'm really curious to see what those critics try to do with it when they get a copy, whether they buy one, or I'm honestly toying with the idea of being a little bit of a troll and getting a few copies from the publisher, and then like mailing them to my biggest haters with like a little personalized message, like, "Hey, enjoy. I hope you love it." So I'm actually playing with that idea. But otherwise, however they get it, I'm really, really, really curious to see how they interact with it, because I'm going to, like, I've already, with a number of them, I've engaged with them in levels of distinctions and clarity. And not just me, to be clear, I don't want to toot my own horn, but like a bunch of other guys on my side as well, where we've engaged on these critics. Some of them quite slanderous guys, and some of them actively engaged in trying to ruin people's lives over these matters. And I shall not name them, but otherwise we have directly engaged them in multiple ways, including myself in a live debate recently, where we've just demonstrated that our side, we have a lot of clarity, we have a lot of nuance and understanding on these issues, and they just can't. They just can't wrap their heads around it, and they just throw the slurs our way, basically. And so I'm going to be really curious for, once the book drops, if and how they interact with it. So that's going to be fun.
Yeah, that'd be exciting. That's probably. That can be more, the waiting for the reaction can be more exciting. Perhaps the most exciting part of the book, just engaging with the people who sort of criticize it. And you can sometimes you can guess somewhere, you can sort of premeditate what they're going to be saying. A lot of the time, it's just going to be bluster. Yeah. One or two people will have some sort of some sincere thoughts and pushback, but yeah, it's. The difficult thing, I think, is sometimes weeding out the serious ones from the unserious ones. Yeah. Now, I've personally, just to give an anecdote, just on Facebook, sometimes you sort of engage comments, which is, I find out more often than not, it's a bad idea. It just sucks time away from your day if you get too emotionally invested in it. Start researching, you start doing like research to sort of support your little comment that you're going to respond to someone on Facebook. It's like just a waste of time. But yeah, on the issue of what's happening in Israel and in Palestine now, I wasn't supporting any issue. I was just responding to someone's argument. I said, actually, that's not factually correct. And then they just accused me of being like opposing their side of the whole issue. And I was like, no, that's not the case. Like, just because I'm actually helping you. You don't want to, because you don't want to put out to the world this dumb argument, and it's going to make people shy away from you because they're going to associate your side with being dumb.
Absolutely.
So it's a real phenomenon that is happening now. So
I'm very glad you brought up that anecdote, because that's actually another huge motivator for my book. And actually, at the very end, I have a section specifically, like just a chapter at the very end, that's just my own advice for how to how to do these things for my side, dissident right broadly, how to engage in these things in a principled manner and not just not just spurg out and become the very thing you're trying to oppose, basically. Because the whole reason why we're engaging in this stuff, and in many people's cases risking reputation, I know I have and I am, even though I think I'm doing a pretty good job of managing it, but stuff can still change. The whole reason why we're doing this, it's not just because we're trying to have fun and we get adrenaline or whatever, even though that can be a real thing, but we're doing it ultimately because we believe that we are fundamentally correct. Our premises and our conclusions are correct, and they are inaccurate. They are the correct description of the world we live in and God's will and other things like that. So it's all predicated on truth. And so a massive motivator for my book is also to compel guys on my own side to, in the heat of these arguments as they go on, don't let that turn you into just a blustering ideologue where you eventually sacrifice even just a little bit of your principles in order to get the one up on someone in an argument, because that just snowballs until you just become a hack. And I don't want that to happen. I've seen cases like that from people on my side, including certain big figures who I will not name. Thankfully, there's many of our guys now on just in this side, generally speaking, are very principled, very well thought. Thank God. But I just want to preempt any silly behavior, any unprincipled, hypocritical argumentation. I want to preempt all that in this book to a large extent, and just say, hey, guys, don't do that. We have standards. We're fighting for those standards, but that means we actually have to abide by them ourselves.
Mm. Yeah, that's a very good point. And like you can draw an analogy from it, like I can from my own experience with theology. I find the best arguments against my position are always those ones who've taken my position seriously, who aren't broad brushing, who aren't making false representations, but have taken the time to take it seriously and give something that's well thought out and articulated. And doing that only does service to your view when you take the other person's view seriously. And I would imagine even that should be especially the case. The more problems you have, the more serious the problems you have with someone's view, then why would you not want to take their view as seriously as possible? Sort of give them the mic and give them the best argument, like give them time to say the best arguments that they have, and then allow the stupidity of their arguments or the incoherence of their arguments to fall on their own demerits, rather than you having to say, okay, no, I'm going to show you guys how silly that view is. If that view is so silly as you claim, allow them to show it themselves, and you can do that by being clear and being precise about what they actually believe. So yeah, I mean that's really helpful. Thanks for doing that.
Of course, that's how you do it. That's how you got to do it.
Now, with I mean, do you feel that you said you've taken steps to sort of avoid being doxxed and cancelled. Do you have any sort of fear that? I mean, what would you do though if you are cancelled, that sort of thing?
Well, not quite with doxing. Like before all this stuff started, I've had my face out, my real name's out, even just my general area where I live. And so I've accepted for a long time, like, especially if I get as popular as I want to, inevitably stuff like my church will come out. And even now, like if someone wants to do like a 4chan level investigation, they could find my church. And it's because I'm not really trying to hide it. If anything, like it's good for stuff to get out as early as possible, so that any trouble that does come, it comes earlier, and is less massive and an issue than it otherwise would be if I was much bigger and it happened then. That's basically my philosophy in all sorts of areas of life, including just with what views I hold. Like if anyone in any context, even in my workplace, which is a very normie space, if they were to ask me my views on something and my view happens to be like an extremely dissident, problematic view, I'd just tell them straight up. I'm completely open that way. And if that leads to like massive consequences, then so be it, because one way or another it is going to come out, because I just don't shut up. And because I make public content where that stuff is inevitably talked about. So it's better for it to happen earlier than later. And so on the one hand, I've allowed more or less who I am, my identity, and even just where I live generally. And if people do digging my church, just to come out, because it eventually will. If I'm going to be a big name public guy, and even just doing particular work in Sydney, especially in the Sydney diocese, then that stuff's obviously going to come out. But then what I also do is that in giving my dissident opinions, very spicy opinions, I very deliberately and carefully articulate them, where I don't just spurg out and say this or that. I rather go through my head and I explain my views in a very sober and intellectual and thought out manner for people to hear. And when I've had the opportunity to do that with various people in authority in my life and friends who express concerns or even shock over certain things that I was said to believe, when I actually did that and I became very articulate with explaining my views, how I came to them, how they're biblically justified, even in cases where they still disagree, they nonetheless say, okay, no, I understand how you come to that, and that's okay, that's fair enough. We can move on business as usual. So those are really, really the key things to be sure of. Like if you're aiming to be a public figure, then you trying to hoard your identity and keep it a total secret, unless your channel is, I mean, like, unless you have a channel where it's like it's your voice, yeah, but otherwise you don't have a face, you have an avatar, blah blah blah, then okay, yeah, you can reasonably well keep your identity hidden. Although even in very exceptional cases, even some people got exposed there, but that's only because they accidentally let a certain detail slip. But otherwise, if your face and name are going to be out there minimum, then there's no point trying to hide all of the other things of your identity, including even your location. And so I didn't really bother to do that, just because it will eventually come out, because I have been public with my face and name, which is good, because especially in this situation now, where a lot of the discourse is like, oh, it's just these anon guys who are just angry with their dads, blah blah blah, and they're doing all this far right stuff. Like, no, I'm actually a very public guy. I've got a name, I've got a face. I'll talk with you live even. And so that's been to my advantage there as well. But otherwise, yeah. However you do with your identity, whether it's public, whether you keep it hidden or anonymous. Otherwise, you want to, when you have your views, you want to make sure you articulate them very well and very carefully in a sober way, so that at minimum, at least the good faith actors who oppose your views, they'll nonetheless respect you for it, and they won't be your enemy in that way.
Mm. Well, do you work in an official capacity with your church, or is that not the case? Yeah. Okay. Now, if that was the case, would that sort of affect how you do things?
Well, that's the kind of speculation I couldn't really answer until I'm there. Maybe I will be.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm an elder of my church, and I'm an ordination candidate. And
Nice.
I mean, there's so many. You have your own personal views, and you have the views of your denomination. And I mean, on this, just to be clear, I agree. I'm in full fellowship and communion, and I submit to all my doctrinal standards going forward. Okay, but there are some sort of other views that aren't sort of part of the confessional standard, with which you disagree with perhaps the majority or many of the people of your church, and that can affect. I mean, even if you personally don't, not too concerned about it. I mean, there's going to be questions asked. There's going to be, people are going to be perhaps looking at you in a funny way, avoiding you, perhaps turning down opportunities for work, which is a real issue. So I suppose, yeah, I mean, suppose you're in a good spot then, because you don't have those sort of issues with your church, and your church has the ability to say, hey, he doesn't represent us. He's saying what he's giving his own personal view.
Yeah, but even then, I love the idea of priestly pastoral accountability, and so even my own ministers, they're aware of that. I won't go into too much detail, but basically they know what I believe and what I do, and they respect that, even if they don't.
Are you the annoying guy that always after every service you're like, hey, you could have said this better, you could have?
No, thankfully, well, it'll depend on the sermon. I haven't for a long time. I have not for a long time, but only if I see something I think is particularly egregious, I'll come up and say, "Hey, I didn't exactly like that," but not in a very nitpicky way. No.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Yeah. Your pastors in your church would be thankful for that, I imagine, especially with your knowledge. Yeah. So
I just hound them outside the church.
Yeah. Text messages up all night, right? And just yeah. Dude, I'm not gonna go into that right now, but yeah. But yeah. That's good. So yeah, you're very blessed to be in that spot. I mean, I don't want to go into it because it's sort of personal for you, but I've got a family and I got kids and so anything, if I were to say anything controversial, that's always a fear for me. Like there's people, I mean, you and I've had to learn it. Like you imagine that most people are sort of sensible, decent people, but then as you experience life, I mean, you get shocked to discover that there's all sorts of people, including people in the church. And so there is always that fear for me. So perhaps that's something that I'll have to think through, how I can sort of prudentially step on toes while still being a good father and husband. It's just, and it's a Christian thing, isn't it? I mean, Christians have to do that all over the world for all different contexts. So it's something for me personally to think about. So now, perhaps in the future, though, do you see yourself doing anything with this? What you're doing with Dissent? Do you see yourself, going on a convention, speaking circuit sort of thing?
Mate, that would be ambitious. That would be really ambitious. I mean, I don't have any of the connections or financial power to really do that now. But if some random sponsor out of the blue just came out and said, "Hey, I got your book. I flipping love this. Oh, by the way, I'm like a multi-millionaire guy. So how about I sponsor like a speaking tour?" I'd be like, "Yes, please. 100%. I'll do that." Absent that though, or even like more realistically, even if like some church or churches asked me to come down to do something. Even my own diocese, wouldn't that be a dream? Not very likely, given they have very different priorities. But if stuff like that came about, I'd 100% be on board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. I mean, who wouldn't, right? Especially people like who like to get their views across. That'd be awesome, and it'd be good for your channel too.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Now I love the Sydney Anglicans, and and whenever anyone says something positive, you always know there's going to be something following up. But I won't even say. I'll just ask you, how do you feel the state of the Sydney Anglicans are in this sort of on this sort of question and these issues?
Yeah. I'll be totally open about that because I mean, like only a few months ago, I made a video on exactly that the problem with the Anglicanism. That's what it's called. Let me see exactly how long ago it was. It was 6 months ago. Oh wow, it's got 7.4K views. That's pretty good. So yeah, that's a video I put out not too long ago. And it's basically so one of my key issues. I mean, just to do the positive, obviously, it has generally orthodox doctrine. And social conservatism. In fact, the Sydney Diocese is notoriously staunch on social conservatism, which is great. That's absolutely necessary. But then outside of that, I have issues with the very heavy evangelical direction they've taken, such that they've stripped away a lot of the Anglican tradition that they inherited. stripped down a lot of liturgies such that many, if not most, Anglican churches look indistinguishable from a Baptist church, which I think is atrocious because we have this incredible tradition of liturgical beauty and it's just squandering it. And there's a reason behind it. It's all about being like extremely gospel centered, Bible, word focused, whatever. But the way they interpret that is basically, at least certain of the leadership who spearheaded this stuff, they basically interpreted that to say where now our faith, it just needs to be doing like, we just need to, in our worship, we need to do the bare minimum of everything else and have as much time for the sermon as possible. That's essentially how it's manifested. And I think that's been terrible, absolutely terrible. And so I'm actually like, myself and a growing group of mates and even just like channel fans, many of whom I met last night. I was at a certain event. It was a Sydney Anglican event, Prayer Book Society. They were doing a special 1552 Book of Common Prayer service to relaunch the Prayer Book Society. And that's where I had my legit like first celebrity moment. Like guys are coming up to me left, right, and center saying, "Oh, the other Paul, I'm a big fan," or like this, that, and the other. And I'm just like, there was so many people. It was actually insane. It was my first ever, like, I knew that would eventually come, given the growth of my channel. But just to actually experience that, I mean, like before, I've had like one or two people come up to me and say, "Hey, are you the other Paul?" But last night it was like a dozen plus people. It was ridiculous. It was actually just people everywhere just coming up to me, and so that was insane. But ultimately, the point of that is that event, I went to it because I see it as a good critical foundation stone in seeing a return to the better liturgical faithfulness in Sydney over time. And so that's a key thing that I'm involved in with a group of friends and with numerous acquaintances.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, there is a growing appreciation for Catholic liturgy. You know, I mean, real, you know, the roots and the way that we've expressed our faith through the centuries. It's interesting. I just completed an assignment yesterday, where I've had to sort of compare and contrast different theologies of worship, and so this involved attending, you know, two different services, and so I compared Hillsong with the Catholic Latin Mass.
And couldn't get more extreme than that.
Yeah, and basically my conclusion was, the Catholic theology of worship is really good, and Hillsong is not Christian. You know? and the problem, and the problem is that, especially in evangelical churches, they're more likely to say, "Hey, we like Hillsong, but we don't like the worship of, you know, we don't like Catholic worship." You know, and I mean, there's just no real reason why. I mean, even they don't even appeal to like a regular principle of worship or anything. It's just like we're not used to that. We're not used to all those sort of strange things. But we know Hillsong music because we hear it on the radio. You know, like Christian radio. So it's horrible.
That's how it happens.
But yeah, that's fair. But the problem, I think, is like, I mean, us online. I mean, we sort of see it. I mean, and you know, Gavin Ortland's, he's made videos about it. Like, there's a trend towards orthodoxy or whatnot. So, but I think we sort of live in a bubble because more broadly speaking, there is still a trend. Like, the fastest growing churches are still sort of Pentecostal, and I think we need to not rest on our laurels, and we need to sort of do what you're doing to sort of encourage and educate people on what worship is. The centrality of Christ's sacrifice, not our subjective experience. Yeah. So you're doing well in that regard. So thank you.
Appreciate it.
Now, the other Paul. I want to talk, sort of jump ship now, if you don't mind, and talk about some other things. If you're happy to do that, yeah. So. One of the things that I really appreciate what you've been doing online is your content against Catholic apologists. And can I just say, you know, decades past, we haven't really had decent Protestant apologists. I mean, you've had one or two sort of, you know, people, I won't name names, but that people have latched onto, and as bad as Catholic answers and some other names have been, they've sort of been trouncing a lot of the Protestants online and whatnot. So, but you have been you have been a breath of fresh air. You've done really great work. So can I commend you for what you've done? Thank you, sir.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
So is there any sort of debate or any discussions that you're looking to do in the future?
Oh yeah, I actually have a few queued up. 3 actually. Just over the next month period. In 8 days from now, on the March 30th, I think it was either our March 30th or the American one. I'll be having a discussion on. Do you know the channel Eschatology Matters?
I don't actually.
Okay, it's a good channel they are, but they're hosting a discussion between myself and a more like post-mill theonomist guy, but it's about basically the key issues that we're kind of discussing, like post-war consensus type things, and we're basically going to have an informal debate of sorts over modern dissident right-wing questions or whatever, like the use of Aristotle and pagan philosophers, and what's racism, this, that, and the other. So that's gonna be a great discussion. After that, I'm not exactly sure the order, but I'll be having a discussion with my friend Sean Luke, Anglican Aesthetics, or a debate on the question of whether if I get the exact thesis wrong, then forgive me, but something like whether the Christian state, in principle, can resist or work. I don't even know the word. Basically, legally oppose false religions by law. So, can the Christian state oppose other religions by law, by the force of law? I'm going to be saying yes. Sean's going to be saying no. And again, I'm not sure whether it's before or after because we don't have an exact date for some of these things. But I'll also be having a 2v2 hosted by the Romanist YouTuber, the relatively new guy, Cameron Riker. And it's because he's been getting pretty big and pretty fast, and he came out. I mean, like, all respect to you, mate, if you're watching, unlikely, but he came out and he's just basically just given like the Catholic Answers 101 talking points against quote unquote Protestantism. And he acts very, very confident with it. If people just say that stuff, then whatever. Yeah. But if it's someone
that stuff works.
But if it's someone
I cut you off, yeah. Okay.
No, all good. But if it's someone who has some size and they're acting very, very confident about it, I kind of smell blood in the water, and so I just came up to him and say, "Hey, bro, let's debate this. Like, I'm willing to do this."
Let me show you some stuff.
Yeah. And then he opted, but then we went into discussion, and we actually opted on the idea that he would host a 2v2. So it's going to be myself and Young Anglican, if you know him, versus 2 other Romanist YouTubers. I believe Braden Cook, the catechumen, and Drew the Catholic. So it's going to be us 2 versus them 2. Just on I forgot the exact issue, but I think it's something about theological authority. So that'll be happening. And then, well, yeah, those are the discussions I've queued up so far, but there's definitely going to be more in the future because this past month, I've basically just been on a spree of just challenging all the normie conservative guys to debates over dissident right-wing issues. And just like, hey, you're so confident that you guys are right. Come on, let's debate this now. And all that. Yeah. So there's definitely going to be more stuff coming up in the future. And yes, I do especially want to still keep up, even though proportionally speaking, it's taken less of my time. I do still want to keep up with responding to the claims of Rome in the East. And so there'll be more content and more debates over that in the future.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that. And Sean Luke, the Anglican Aesthetics guy, I remember now he did that debate with Doug Wilson, didn't he?
That he did, yeah.
On a similar issue, I think. So, yeah, it'd be interesting. I love both of you guys. So it'd be interesting to see views bouncing off each other. So that's great. So, I mean, and you have the advantage of knowing what he's going to say. So you're going to come at him with like left field sort of like
I mean, I do. Well, here's the thing: I do treat debates like warfare, basically.
Oh,
That's
of
what they
course.
are. That's what they are.
Yeah.
And so I do very deliberately. My debate tactics are definitely inspired from reading in military theory.
Hmm.
And that's very deliberate. And I as badly as I want to, I mean, I do tell some people, but I don't want to tell people too far and widely the kind of general tactics I go for in debates. So yeah, you'll just see it. You'll just see it in action, I guess.
Great. You mentioned the sort of Catholic. I mean, that's sort of like a moniker, like a catch-all term now for bad apologetics, right? Catholic anti-style. So,
Pretty much.
and for good reason too.
Oh yeah,
So, I won't go in like there's so many examples, but yeah, I mean, but the problem is it just works. Like it just works for the majority of the people that they're talking to, and it's so
yeah,
frustrating. And that's probably a reason that I wouldn't want to get into that because I'll just be so frustrated. You'd hear a basic argument that not even their own theologians would endorse
yep.
half the time, but because it's against the dirty prots, oh, then it's a good argument, right? And
Pretty much.
oh, it's so frustrating. And then it often takes much more energy to respond to it. And then because you did take time and energy to respond to, Protestant cope or something, and it's just, yeah, I don't. It would be just a head banging experience, I think. So,
Yeah.
so I don't, yeah, good luck to you, and I hope you don't sort of get the life sucked out of you just responding to bad arguments. I hope it's sort of an enjoyable experience for you, anyway.
Much
So,
appreciated.
and I'll shout out to Taylor Barrett. He's not like that. He likes to, because I know he's listening. Thanks to you, Taylor, for taking Protestant views and doctrine seriously and
Yeah,
give your
mad
service
respect.
to your own communion.
Yeah, I've talked with Taylor. I've seen his postings. Big respect to him.
Yeah, so be more like Taylor, everyone. That's one of the themes of this video. That's actually why I left his name on the heading there. So, but but actually, I don't have much more to discuss or ask from you, the other Paul. But if there is anything else you'd like to leave us, perhaps let us know about where we can find more of your material, how we can subscribe your channel, and what you're doing.
Absolutely. Huge thanks again, Troy, for having me on, especially as another Australian content maker. I feel like in many ways I've basically had the monopoly of online theology YouTube from Australia, which I've long enjoyed, not gonna lie. But to actually go on a channel of another Aussie YouTuber is actually quite great. So that's a great experience. Thank you for that. And with that, people can find me of this same name, my own YouTube channel, The Other Paul. But I also have a Rumble channel of the same name, and that's where I tend to do discussions like live streams or videos on things that are not suitable for YouTube, to say the least. But then I also have my website, theotherpaul64.com, where, among other things, I'll occasionally post blog stuff whenever I find something more appropriate for that kind of setting. But also, I have my support page, Locals. I have a Locals page. It's just The Other Paul there as well, and people can join that at various tiers and get cool benefits, and likewise help me turn this into a job, which I really hope to do so, and I do genuinely hope to. God willing, it'll be very ambitious, but with recent stuff I've just started on, with pushing for greater channel growth, and especially in light of being more focused on certain things, especially with Anglican theology, I'm aiming to help that just really smash my growth channel this year to a level where I also get more and more financial supporters to the point of it being like a sustaining job. That's my ultimate aim for it. So yeah, people, if you value what I do, support me on Locals, and I'll probably also open up something just directly on my website as well, like through Stripe, so you don't have to make like a Locals account and whatever for people who prefer that. And yeah, and help me turn this into a job. But otherwise, I hope everyone enjoys what I do on the various platforms.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, for coming and stopping by, and to all the people who've been watching. Thank you. The discussion has ended. Go in peace.
Thanks for watching.